सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Very warm welcome to everyone to yet another session of Weekend Conversations. And today we have a very special guest, a very good friend of mine, Shri Srinath Mohandas ji. He is an assistant professor at School of Ethics, Governance, Culture and Social Systems in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit, Kerala. He is an educator specialized in curriculum and pedagogy with experience in developing content, designing curriculum and teaching middle and high school levels. Very warm welcome, Srinath, and thank you for agreeing to do this session.
Namaste, Nitinji. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. Viewers, whatever questions you may have as part of this session, please post it in Q&A box and not in the chat box. And we will try to take it at least 2 or 3 questions towards the end of the session. Without further much ado, Srinath, my first question is about your current work that you are doing. You're teaching in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit. So, and I think you have also enrolled for your PhD there. So, just give a brief for the benefit of our readers, what kind of work you're doing at the Vishwavidyapit, the activities that is going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Hari Om to all the viewers also here. Thank you, Nitinji. To answer the first question, so as you said, I work as assistant professor for education in the School of Ethics, Governance, Culture, Social Systems in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit. So my campus is in Ernakulam. We have another campus in Pune, but I work here in Ernakulam. So basically, my work is twofold. The one is with respect to teaching Indic knowledge systems, a course called Indic Knowledge Systems 1 to students. So I am the Upa Acharya, which is like the Mukhya Acharya, the main professor for teaching the subject is Professor Gauri Mahalikar, which I guess many of our viewers might be knowing. So she also gives Ola lectures on every Thursday. So I assist her with respect to this particular course. And so that is my first role that I do here. And secondly, with respect to something called KTPI, Knowledge, Traditions, Practices of India. So KTPI is a subject which is offered by CBSE in 11th and 12th standards. And it already has a set of textbooks, and it is one of the optional courses for 11th and 12th students. So CVV has taken up, CVV is Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit. So CVV has taken up this project of providing teaching learning assistance to KTPI, where we come out with a series of teaching learning equipments for both the teachers and students. And also trying to create a vibrant community of teachers across India, where they network and where they are equipped with teaching this particular subject correctly. So that particular project that CVV has undertaken, and I'm part of that project. So I'm actively involved with that project. So these are two main, let us say, two primary responsibilities that I have, apart from many others. So one thing I would like to mention here is about this Indic Knowledge Systems course that CVV offers. So whatever courses that a student chooses in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit, be it a UG student, PG student, PhD student, or students who choose some of the external courses, Indic Knowledge Systems is the foundation course that we offer. So every student has to go through Indic Knowledge Systems. And we have IKS 1, Indic Knowledge Systems 1, and Indic Knowledge Systems 2, of which Indic Knowledge Systems 1 is what I'm teaching. And this is basically an introduction to the whole world of Indian knowledge systems as such. And this is being transacted in English. And who is qualified to learn this? Anybody with a primary understanding of English and an interest for the subject. So, and this comes right from the vision of Swami Chinmayaji, who's from whose vision this whole Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit has come up. And we have a whole group of experts in each of these domains. Yeah,
that's wonderful, Srinath. I mean, Indic knowledge systems is our kids today, even our own generation. we were told that Pythagoras theorem was invented by Pythagoras. We were told that our ancestors were, superstitious and misfits. I mean, of course, they did not mention it, but that was the meaning. Every worthy knowledge was given by the Westerners. So you're doing a wonderful work there. So that day, as we were discussing how to go about this conversation today, one of the most fascinating thing that I understood from your narration about your background and life, early life, and all is that you come from a family which subscribes to communism and deeply subscribes to communist ideology, and the kind of work you're doing now, you're into adhyatma, you're into dharma so much deeply. So that is a wonderful journey in itself, I think. So can you just share for our readers, with our readers and listeners, how did your introduction to Hindu dharma happen, and how did especially your introduction to adhyatma happen, and who were your early influencers, from whom you got influence? It may be family members or teachers or books or whatever it is.
Nitinji, I thought I will just qualify that question a little bit, in the sense. So, let us say my father's side, my paternal grandparents, they have a strong influence of communism, of course. But then my family was never into the party politics of it. It is more like, the communist ideas were there. And that is more of an emotional bond, because my paternal grandparents, both of them hail from this village called Elangulam in Kerala. And all the Malayalis will identify the place. It is a birthplace of EMS Namboodiripad, who was the first chief minister of Kerala, also the tallest communist leader of India. I mean, he is no more, of course. So it was more of an emotional bond there, but then, of course, those ideas were there. And in another way, most of Kerala, at least last 3 generations of Kerala, the basic template of political understanding about society is communism. And so in spite of that, my grandparents are deeply religious. So communism is the political template, and religion is their personal kind of a thing. So, but having said that, the political ideas were, or rather, I grew up seeing those things. And when I was in 11th and 12th standard, that is when you suddenly start realizing about society and politics and all of that. I was also drawn into these ideas of the communist ideas of equality and a superficial understanding, let us say. So I was very drawn into that. And slowly, so let us say my political inclination became communist at that point, like any other youngster of that age would do. But then it slowly started getting into my cultural aspect as well. So I am slowly getting into a cultural communist, cultural Marxist also. However, the big change came. My first, rather the first thing I remember influencing me out of cultural communism was reading C. Rajagopalachari's Mahabharata. I think I was in 12th standard when I first read that, and that completely gave me a kind of shraddha in this whole Adhyatmic literature. And then the next big change came when I read complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Of course, I started reading following the abridged version. And that, I would say, really gripped me completely. My mind, intellect, everything was gripped by that one piece of book. So I remember the abridged version was something like 900 pages. And I completed reading that in 5 days. Day and night I was reading that. And yeah, I really can't say how much I understood at that stage, but then still, I was completely absorbed and taken by it.
The only book I remember reading day and night is the Harry Potter book series that came out.
Okay. By the way, I have not read Harry Potter. I mean, the first book I read, but after that I didn't really got into it. So in many ways, it is Swami Vivekananda and his complete work that pulled me in, which soon led me to, so after reading that, especially Swamiji's writings, Swami Vivekananda, his writings on Raja Yoga, then I enrolled myself for a yoga course, and the Hatha Yoga course. It was there at Thrissur District Yoga Association, and one of my own teachers from school, Dr. Balakrishnan sir, he was teaching it. So after yoga, I would sit with sir. There was another sir called Gopinathan sir. Both Balakrishnan sir, both Gopinathan sir will sit with me, and then we would discuss some of these ideas of yoga. Then I got introduced to the books of Swami Shivananji and Swami Krishnananji, both of them Divine Life Society. Wonderful books on yoga, the whole concept. They actually initiated, not exactly initiated, but they encouraged me to do Tradagam. Focusing on your eyebrow center and I can't call it meditation, but at least I sat silently concentrating on it. All of that actually, so I think that is when my sadhana started. Maybe that was my first attempt at doing some sadhana, and it gave me really good results, which really deepened my faith in the whole process. And I went there. I also need to mention that my grandmother, who might be a political communist because of emotional attachment to EMS Namboodiripad and all of them, but then she has, I mean, actually, I grew up listening to the stories from Mahabharata Ramayana, told by her. So that way, that initiation was there, and she also insisted that I sit in the evenings and do Nama Japa. So there are some chantings we should do. So I mean, I and my brother, both of us used to do such things. But apart from that, I think it was. If it is a one-word answer, then I would say Swami Vivekananda and complete with Swami Vivekananda.
Wonderful. I'm very much tempted to ask this question, though it is not strictly within the format of this conversation. Is that how did your family or any typical Malayali family negotiate with political and cultural communism on one hand and strict adherence to traditions, practices, religious practices on the other hand? How does it work? I mean, I cannot imagine it.
I think that's a good question that I also ask. I mean, even today I see a lot of people, my own friends and people like that. They are very, culturally Hindu, but then at the end of the day, they would always subscribe to political communism. I think at certain level that cognitive dissonance is not happening, or maybe I think they are not thinking too much about the disconnect between what you preach and what you do, I guess. So some of these things are absolutely in contradiction to what we believe in our heart of the hearts, right? But then I think maybe no, I'm not putting them down or anything. I'm just telling that maybe they are not thinking that it is it is worth to think about this disconnect and resolve the disconnect if at all it is there. That is the only thing I can find. Otherwise, it is on your face. You cannot be this and that.
Yes. Anyway, so moving on, my question is, though you have been teaching in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapith, I think for 1 year or so, your association with Chinmaya Mission goes a long way, I think a decade or two. So share with us about this long association with Chinmaya Mission and how were you introduced to Chinmaya Mission? What kind of influences this long association has had on you as a person and on your life journey in general?
Yeah, so the first time I walked into Chinmaya Mission, that was Chinmaya Mission Trishul Center. That was January 26th, 2006. Yeah, that's like 15 years. I mean, I completed 15 years. So I remember that date very specially because that was a Republic Day, and Chinmaya Mission at that, the Trishul Center of Chinmaya Mission was conducting a program called Living in Harmony. It was basically Vedanta talks, a series of Vedanta talks, not from a very Vedantic scriptural point of view, rather how do we live our lives better so that we can, we can feel we are living better. So one of my friends actually suggested that I attend it. And why did I attend it? I attended it because I had nothing else to do on that particular evening. So I thought, okay, why not go there? And I went there, and it was very interesting. I mean, the whole the seminar, I mean, or rather, the talks were very interesting. And Sri C.K. Suresh, one of the senior, members of Chinmaya Mission, was the one who was doing it. But what attracted, so it was a basically 5-day program. And what really attracted me was the entire program was organized by a series of, or rather a group of youngsters who was of my age. Like I was 18 or 19, 18 years at that time. I mean, 19 years at that time. And then These all of them were of my age. But first of all, they're initiative to do such things which are of use to a lot of people. And secondly, they were really sattvic people. The right word to use is sattvic. Very cheerful, very happy, very easy to go. And I really wanted to be one among them. I really wanted to be like them. So that was a pull that actually took me. And once the program was over, I went and talked to them. How can I be part of your group? Do you have some group, etc.? So they said we are part of Chinmaya Yuva Kendra. It's shortened as CHIK. So CHIK stands for Chinmaya Yuva Kendra. I think in one of our questions came up. Right. So we are chicks, and chicks here means Chinmaya Yuva Kendra members. So they said we are chicks, and would you like to join us? So I said, what do I do? I mean, do I have to pay you something? I mean, subscription fee something. So they said all you have to do is come visit, one Saturday, 4:30 to 6. We will be discussing. We will be having a study class. So I asked, what do we study? He said, we study Vedanta. And I have heard this word Vedanta, of course, but didn't know what it meant. And then I went one of the evenings I went. And what I saw was they were discussing one textbook, which is called A Manual of Self-Unfoldment. It is written by Swami Chinmayanji. It's a commentary. It's a basic foundational text on Vedanta. And they were reading it and then discussing it in the light of their own life experiences. I felt very connected to that. So that is how my whole association with Chinmaya Mission started. And that really became a turning point in my life. One in the sense, my whole study of Vedanta started that way. In fact, it was not a very conscious decision that I got initiated or introduced to Vedanta. It all happened naturally. And then I realized that this is exactly what I wanted, and this is exactly where I should belong. So that is one line, one thing that happened, and my study of Vedanta continues. The other line, how did it influence me? So during those times, I was also going through a certain, let us say, bad phase. And today I realized that maybe I could have called it depression or whatever. I mean, at that time, I didn't know that that is what I was going through. But then I need some anchorage, some point to anchor upon. And then I realized that Vedanta is the right anchor. All other are quick fixes or temporary, temporary things to hold on to. So that one way that really, became my anchor for my life. And secondly, I got to meet a lot of, let me call Mahatmas, because these are Acharyas of Chinmaya Mission. Some of them not Acharyas, not of Chinmaya Mission per se, but walking the same similar path, who not only preach the whole Vedantic philosophy, but rather live it. So we say this shloka in Bhagavad Gita, right? I think it is in Karma Yoga, 21st shloka, I guess. Yadyada ajarati shreshta tadreve tarojana sayat pramanam kurude logas tadanivartade. So whatever the great men do, others follow it. So, or rather, whatever is the standards kept by the men of greatness, the world follows it. So in a way, more than reading the Vedantic ideas, I could see glimpses of, how it is being lived. Like, for example, Swami Mitranandji, Swami Kabir and I could spend a lot of time talking to them, asking my most simplest of the questions and doubts regarding my own life. So these are some of the, and the best thing is that I continue to be in touch with them. They continue to guide me. So, it's a lifelong journey. And let us say I got a best friend through Vedanta, in the form of Acharyas. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I think I went all over the place.
We will come back to the question. I have one more sub question from what you said about Vedanta as an anchor. You found it as that. I think that is a very interesting and very important perspective. I wanted to shed more light on what do you meant. What did you mean by when you said that you found Vedanta as an anchor for your life? So, what aspect of Vedanta helped you to center yourself? And any advice to you for others, from you for others, if they want to do this as well?
Yeah. So I would say now Vedanta is, simply speaking, okay. And one of the ways of looking at what Vedanta is would be, what is your attitude for life? Right now, this word attitude is being thrown around by all of us. So I'm not speaking from that sense of the word. So at the end of the day, what are you looking for in your life? We all talk about purpose, goals, etc. So what is that you're looking for in life? What is our goal in your life? Right. So Vedanta actually discusses these questions, some of the fundamental, most existential questions man and woman can have. I should not exclude women from this. So these are some of the most fundamental existential questions that Vedanta discusses. So while going through some of these questions, you also realize that these are the exact questions you are also asking. However, articulated in a different way, maybe in a more modern sense, maybe in English, etc. So let us just take something simple as what is that you want in life? What is your goal of life? Now, walking through Vedanta, I realized that the Hindu scriptures, the dharmic scriptures actually say, the fourfold are the goals of life, like the Chaturveda Purushartha, so Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And this actually encompasses every little thing that we aspire to be in this life, every little thing that we want to be in life actually encompasses in that. Now, the next question is, okay, so if it is so, then what is that you have to do about it? Then Vedanta actually gives you a practical steps of doing. It is not an injunction. It is not that you guys have to do these are the 10 commandments you have to follow. Not at all like that. Rather, it tells you the signs of uh, uh, you know uh, or rather, let me say that with the basic principles, the foundational principles of living an active life. So, what are the basic things about life? And it is your wrong association with the world that is causing you hurt, that is causing you displeasure. Rather, if you orient yourself in a way which is congenial, then the same experiences can become better for you. So basically, the whole attitude for life changed. I should say I'm still in the process of learning. It is not that I've become self-realized and uh, I'm a Ramana Maharshi. No, that is not the point. But then the journey started somewhere. The journey has to start from somewhere. That really happened, and the orientation for life changed. And the marked difference is that ever since I started learning Vedanta, now every experience that comes to you, right? Some of them are really shattering, disappointing. All kinds of experience come to you. Happy experience also come to you. Now then you also stand back and start analyzing that experience from the light of Vedanta. And then you every time you do that, your conviction on the scriptures, your conviction on the masters increases, because you actually see the play of whatever they have meant happening right in front of your eyes. So that way it became an anchor to my life. So of course you get carried away at moments, you get carried away by certain experiences, but this every time you're carried away, you're also grounded, and Vedant grounds you back. It is actually Guru, it is the Kripa of Guru that grounds you, and Vedant that way becomes a central point for me.
Wonderful, wonderful, Srinath. Your response reminds me of this. When I started studying Advaita Vedanta, and I came across this very basic definitions of who is an adhikari for Vedanta, and all the qualities that are listed. So one of the qualities is, of course, as you know, is titaksha. And Adi Shankaracharya defines it in Viveka Chudamani as Sahanam Sarvadukkanam Apratikara Purvatakam Chinta Vilaparahitam Satitaksha Abhiviyate. And I think that one definition has stayed with me for many years. I don't think I have perfected it. I haven't even achieved 1% of it. But still, I think that has served me as an anchor. The goal, so to speak, is um, that titaksha. That is, titaksha is not, nowadays, if people watch a lot of opera soaps and dramas, the TV serials in Hindi and all, they're always the good person, the good guy or the good girl is always facing all the kind of troubles, but is actually internally she is sad, but still she bears with it. I think that is not titaksha. The second line says that, the first line says Sahanam Sarva Dukkanam, forbear all the dukkas. But the second line says Chinta Vilapa Rahitam, without any chinta. I think we have understood this important quality in a wrong way, that we have to bear with all the things, but most of us cannot bear with injustices. We cannot bear with
Yeah.
dukkha. So so if you have to choose one tenet of Vedanta like that, so what would it be that you saw as an anchor? If one tenet, if you have to, one or two tenets, if you have to choose.
So one of it, I'm not saying this for the sake of saying because you said it, but really speaking for me also, this whole shloka of Titiksha, yes, sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikarya purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. This is from Vivek Chudamani, as you rightly said. This has been one of the most, I mean, the first time I studied this from, so Swami Chinmayanji in one of his commentaries has quoted this as being quoted by Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya. So there, when I read that commentary, I mean, that particular shloka, it fascinated me so much because, it was like something that just exploded on your face, right? It's a completely different perspective of how you look at so-called dukkha. And so this, I was studying this particular text for some days, and then one of the evenings, one of my friends came to my room. That's why I was staying at Chinmaya Mission Palakkad at that time with Swami Asheshananji. So one of my friends came, and he was working in a certain place, and for some reason not of his, like, he was accused of something which he didn't do, and then he was fired, and he was absolutely heartbroken because, at the end of it was not his fault. So he came to tell me all his mental woes, and all I could do was, give him a patient listening. And he broke down in front of me, cried in front of me, and after that he was leaving my room, and as he walked out, as an Atmagata, as a telling himself, he was chanting this Sahanam Sarva Dukkhanam Apratikara Purvakam Chinta Vilavarahidam Sadhu Tikshani Garbide. And that was like a lightning on me because, I could actually understand what he was telling and what he was practicing at that time. After that, even today, this particular sloka, especially when I'm going through something not very pleasant, I at least try to remember what is Titiksha, and Titiksha, how important Titiksha is for you to grow grow adhyatmically. So that is one thing I could say. The second thing, maybe not exactly a Vedantic in the sense from a Jnana Yoga point of view, but more from a Bhakti point of view. Something which is very, what is that? Very dear to me, or rather something that gives me a lot of reassurance is this shloka, which says, it comes from Vishnu Purana, the Balashwari part, where Na Vasudeva Bhaktanam Ashubham Vidyate Kvachida Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Bhayam Naivo Pujayate. So, he who has dependent himself on Vasudeva, then, I mean, he's untouched by Jara Vyadhi, Bhayam and all of that. So that is kind of a lot of reassurance. Another thing I can think of is this, what is that? What is that? Achara Prabhavo Dharma, Dharmasya Pravrachitaha. It is acharas that, talking everybody can do, right? But at the end of the day, how do you know somebody is a dharmi or not? It is acharas that what makes a person. It is achara is Bhagavan itself, which is Narayana itself. So some of these.
I think there is a similar verse on Achara in Manusmriti as well, where it says Achara Paramo Dharmaha. That's what it says.
Yeah. So to start with, I was not a person of Achara at all. I mean, even now I don't consider myself a person of rituals and Achara. But then now I understand and appreciate the importance of it. And slowly I try to inculcate those in my own lifestyle.
Wonderful. As I think Chinmay Mission runs a steady scheme based on the books of Swami Chinmayananda, for providing a grounding on Vedanta. Do you know about it? Can you shed more light on this?
Yeah, actually, I came prepared for this in the sense I wanted to speak about it. So, if you don't mind, may I share my screen? I can actually show that study screen.
Yeah, please. Sure. Yeah.
Just give me a second.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about it, and therefore I took a screenshot of this particular thing. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is for the benefit. Sorry, this is for the benefit of everyone who is listening to us. So, Gurudev Swami Chinmayananji, I'll talk a bit about Gurudev and what was his mission also, which will be contextual here. So, Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya, he actually wrote bhashyas on Prasthanatrayi. And by Prasthanatrayi, we mean the Upanishads, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita. So the 10 Upanishads, the Dasha Upanishad, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita. Sorry. Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya wrote bhashyas on it, which means commentaries on it. Now, what Gurudev Swami Chinmayanji did was, he actually wrote commentaries on Bhagavan Shankaracharya's bhashyas. Bhagavan Shankaracharya's commentaries, because those were in pure Sanskrit, and it was written, if you go to, according to the colonial historians, Shankara was born somewhere around 788 AD. And if you go by the traditional scholars, then it goes back to BCE. So we are talking about a commentary written on Upanishads, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita at least 2000 years back, if you are going by the traditional scholars. So now it has to be recontextualized, and it has to be spoken in a language that is understood by the university educated, let us say, the university educated modern intellectuals, students, youngsters and everybody. So he went on writing commentaries on the commentaries of Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya. And this is what you see on screen right now. It is a list of books which actually gives us a good grounding on the whole discipline of Advaita Vedanta. So it starts with this book called Kindle Life. And Kindle Life is basically a small book, like 250 pages book, where Swami Chinmayanji, Gurudev Swami Chinmayanji has taken some 25 topics. I don't remember the number of topics actually. And he has written short essays on it. And these essays are like 1.5, some of them are 1.5 pages, maximum is 5 pages long. So one of the essays would be like freedom and licentiousness. So what do you mean by freedom, and how is it different from licentiousness? And licentiousness, by it we mean, doing whatever you feel like doing. So is freedom really means doing whatever you feel like doing? So something which is very relevant and very simple as that. Simple in the sense, the topic is simple, but then if it is solved, if that question is solved in our head, most of our problems are also solved. And then maybe what is Gayatri Mantra and why is it relevant and how it should be done, etc. etc. So Kindle Life basically talks about that. The second book, Manual of Self-Unfoldment, that is where the whole introduction into Vedanta comes. And he sets very beautifully the context for it. In many ways, it is this book, Manual of Self-Unfoldment, which I consider equal to Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I say I consider it equal to Bhagavad Gita because for me, it has become, or rather, I find my entire source of strength in this particular book. And I have suggested it to many of my friends. All of them have also found it very useful. Then if you look at the other books like Bhaja Govindam, Tattva Bodham, Atma Bodham, these are all Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya's works, and Gurudev has written commentaries on that. Now, Vedanta Through Letters is a set of letters that Gurudev has written to his disciples across the world. So these are Vedanta in a very practical sense. These disciples would discuss all kinds of mundane things with him, like, what do I do when my husband has fought with me and then I can't practice Vedanta right now? So Gurudev would give some very practical things to say. Something as simple as that. I'm telling you, it is very mundane like that. So, I'm not listing each of the books here. You can actually see. Many of you can also take a screenshot if you wish. And to sum up, I would say, it takes, interestingly, Gurudev has also given this dose per day. If you can see the right-hand corner, there is dose per day and number of times you should read, right? So it says if you're reading Kindle Life, then you should read only 10 pages a day. What if I read 12 or 15 or 20? The point is you're not reading it, you're studying it, right? So you have to do mananam of it. You read it, then reflect upon it, compare it to your own life experiences. That is when
you read it 3 times like that, because number of times I see that it's written 3 times for Kindle.
So completely do it. Then only we can call it study, right? And that is why it's called a study speed. So I'll now stop sharing. I hope,
So how people can do this on their own, or they have to enroll somewhere in the nearest Chinmaya center or something like that?
Nothing like that. So long as you have the study scheme, you can start it your own. The only thing is that you might have to get the books. Chinmaya Mission has all the books. Therefore, it is easier for you to walk into a Chinmaya Mission bookstore. These days, you can even order it online.
So they don't do anything like a certification course or on this. It's not. It's a personal study.
Yeah, this particular study scheme is a personal study. There's no certification on it. However, in Chinmaya there are various other certificate courses, including Bhagavad Gita course, Vedanta course. So if somebody is looking for a certification course, then there are a variety of other courses available. But study scheme is more your personal sadhana, and this is Swadhyayam, self-study of the scriptures.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Um, so I have been following your work on, your posts on social media, especially Facebook, and we know each other for a long time. Apart from the Vedanta posts, what I have seen with regularity and great enthusiasm from your side are the posts related to temples and temple visits. And I think you have done many posts on even Swami Ayyappa and visit to Shabarimala and all those things. So tell us about this aspect of your spiritual journey, yeah, the temples, the devotion to deities, this aspect.
Yeah, so I must confess that this is a more recent phenomenon as far as I am concerned, because to be exactly, if I can date it, I can say that October, 1st October 2018. I think this transformation came to me, which is as recently as that. So, like most Hindu, youngsters, I would say, I was also not a very temple oriented person, because I thought that temples are for, I mean, even I, and when you study a little Vedanta, because of your own confusion and misunderstanding, you also tend up thinking that temples are for kids, and so we say kids go to temple, men read Bhagavad Gita kind of. No, but I mean, to all the audience here, I would like to clarify that is absolutely not how it is. Right? Temples are the nerve centers of Hindu culture and civilization, and irrespective of the greatest Vedanti you are, temples are important for all of us. So, so to start with, I was also very indifferent towards temples. However, my whole shift came after the whole Shabarimala episode, and that Sabarimala verdict came on September 20th, 2018, and it pained me a lot. In spite of not being a very temple-oriented person, it pained me a lot because I knew it was complete adharmic in that sense. It was completely against. I believe that. I don't question the wisdom of the Supreme Court of India, absolutely not. But then they were misled. Let us say they were not given the right counsel on this particular thing. Now, so that actually, now the whole point was, I could see a lot of people talking about it, my own friends, my own people, my own family members, with such carelessness, as not knowing what it is all about, and still calling it progressive and all of that. So I knew it was not right, but then I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to convince the other person. That is when I started, researching my own research, my own studying. Basically, I went through some of the, some people guided me through some of the Agamic texts. And I must say that is when I became a very close friend of yours, because I used to continuously read your posts, and especially your book, Menstruation Across Cultures. That really helped me, get the right perspective to. It really upped my morale. Let me put it that way.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and the more I started reading it, the more I started writing about it. So I made a series of posts, mostly on Facebook. So then, slowly I started getting opportunities to visit temples, and that happened organically, right? And there was throughout 2019, if you ask me, as part of my work, I would visit various cities of Tamil Nadu. I was working before I joined Chinmaya Vishwavidyapith. I was working at a company called Chrysalis, and I was an academic. An academic consultant to some 23 schools across Tamil Nadu. So, as part of my work, I used to visit these places, and and in Tamil Nadu is littered with a lot of great temples. So mornings I will be spending my time office work, and evenings I will be all alone, going to these temples. And now that I also have started understanding why there is a temple, and temple is not just a place for congregation, religious congregation, like the some of the other religions, the structures of other religions are more for congregation rather than based on agamic principles, right? So I understood that is not what temple is for. And a few of the examples I can really give us, I got this great opportunity to visit Tiruvannamalai and Chidambaram, right? Both of them are two directions. Chidambaram is in Kadalur district, and Tiruvannamalai So I used to stay in Pondicherry at that time. So I was in the middle of Chidambaram and Tirunelveli. So
Okay.
every month I would go there, and every time I walked into Chidambaram temple, then I would be. It is not walking into just any other temple. You would really feel that emotions welling up in you, and uh, I mean, I don't know how to explain it because these are very personal experiences. So I would stay 2 or 3 days there, and I would go to the temple, and I would do all my chantings and everything there. Same thing with Tiruvannamalai. I could do a lot of Girivalam. Every time I visit there, we go around the Arunachalesha. Sorry, we go around the Arunagiri, basically, Arunachalam mountain. So all of this. So at one end, it really connected me to the Devata as such, and I understood the concept of Devata as different from Ishvara. And I think another thing is also about uh, so again, Swami Chinmayanji used to say that there are basically three kinds of people, or rather four kinds of people. So those people who are very intellectual oriented. The second group is like more emotional oriented. The third is like more kinesthetic. They want to do things always. They want to always get active. So Gurudev calls them people of head, people of heart, and people of hand. And there is another category who might not fall into any of the three. So for them there is another set of things. So basically, the people of head are those who pursue jnana yoga. The people of heart are the people who follow bhakti, and the people of hand are the people who follow karma yoga. So initially, I used to think that I am the person of head because you're studying Vedanta and intellectual and all of that. Then I realized that no, I'm not purely into that. Of course, there is one side to it, but then all these emotions start getting involved, and I got more comfortable with those. And that is where the whole temples, the going to temples really helped me. And now I see that as an integral part of my personality. And it really grounds me back into whatever Vedanta that I have studied, I've been studying, I'm still studying. These temple visits actually, what is that? Adds on to that. So, yeah, so this is basically the theory behind my temple visits.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's an important point you make, that people have the head have to ultimately come to the heart if they want to make a progress, and people of the heart have to ultimately come to the head if they want to make progress. I think they go hand in hand, I think.
And Nitinji, here I just need to add one point also. So many of us in the sense, generally I'm talking about youngsters of our generation. We tend to think that, if you ask some 10 questions about culture, about religion, then you are an intellectual. You are not, right? Asking questions are really important. No question about it. However, it is not about asking questions. Anybody can ask questions on anything, right? But then it is also about asking the right question and also asking question with an openness of understanding it. And so I mean, I'm telling generally, many of us tend to think that simply throwing questions would make you an intellectual. That really doesn't. So I think that aspect we have to understand that. Otherwise, we are living in this false paradise, thinking that we are doing a great service by asking all the wrong questions, kind of.
You ask the wrong question, you get a wrong answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have a couple of audience questions. I just want you to take a few of
Sure.
them. The one is, I think there are two questions which are very related, so I'll read out both of them so you can answer them together. One is, in current environment, how does one strike a balance between material world and spirituality, especially if one does not want to be a part of an institution or a mission? And another is related one is, could you please throw some light on how to stay grounded during the challenging times?
Okay, I think I'll take the second question first and then come to the first question. How do we stay grounded, especially during challenging times? See, I think our whole spiritual journey, our whole adhyatma. So, what is a core of the whole adhyatma? I think it is our sadhana, right? So every day we do our sadhana. And what do we mean by sadhana? Sadhana is any spiritual discipline, ideally given to you by a guru, If you don't have a personal guru, then maybe you can pick up any sadhana that is advised by Shastras. And then you do that every day, regularly, consistently, ideally at a certain given point of time. And then you do that with a specific intention of, growing in your life, evolving adhyatmically in your life. So this is sadhana, right? So if each one of us do our sadhana regularly, then we will always be grounded. There will be times we can be carried away, but then even if we carried away, we will be brought back to the center because sadhana will take care of it. Because through sadhana, you are getting connected to Bhagavan, you are getting connected to your Guru. So that is one answer. How do we stay grounded? Do sadhana regularly. Let us do sadhana regularly. And especially if we have a guru, if we consider somebody as guru, then I think we should definitely invoke our guru every day, also our Ishtadevta. So that is one way of answering. The other thing is, see, even if we are not grounded, let us say, even if we don't really want to be grounded, our life will get us grounded, right? You will get hit by all kinds of experiences. Because that is grace. That is again Bhagwan's grace. Actually, every time you're carried away, something will happen to you that you don't have a choice but to be grounded. So let us not worry too much about getting carried away also. I think that is one thing.
I think it is Kunti in Mahabharata who says, Bhagwan gave me problems, gave me pain so that I can remember you again and again.
Constantly, correct. That's so true. The first question was regarding how do we strike a balance between material life?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying this from the authority of a guru or something. I'm a sadhaka. I'm also walking the path. But I think my quick fix for this is again, first of all, it is about sadhana, right? If all we have to do is do our sadhana regularly, and once we do that sadhana regularly, then get involved with our life. We are married, we have family responsibilities, we have office responsibilities. Just get along with it. So as long as we don't compromise on our sadhana and then just take life as it comes very naturally, discharging our duties, whatever we are supposed to do at a certain given point of time, I think we will not have much conflicts between these two. However, if we compromise on our sadhana, I think that is when we get a lot of stress because you end up feeling that you have compromised on your adhyatmic life. So again, my quick fix for that is let us do sadhana so that again this whole thing is let us say when we do sadhana, there is a certain intelligent principle that is working in us, and that intelligent principle will actually give us the right guidance. How to what extent you have to pursue one path. Should you actually take a detour? Should you actually go with more intensity? So that is at that point you can let it go. So long as we're doing our sadhana correctly, this should come naturally to us. Hope that helped. That answer helped.
Wonderful. So I think we are almost coming to the conclusion of this fascinating conversation. So one last question I have is uh, any final comments, any suggestions you have for those who want to begin their journey into Vedanta? I mean, we have so many texts, so many things to read. I mean, sometimes it becomes difficult where to start, where to not. And any other advice on kind of pitfalls that one may find in the beginning of the journey, and they should avoid it.
See, I think one of the most important things is, um, whom do we approach to study Vedanta? I think, right? Because these days there are a lot of so-called masters, and especially in Facebook, if you see a lot of people, including myself, writes about these things. Now, does that mean that all of the people who write or talk about Vedanta are they qualified to speak about it, or can we actually take them as a point of whatever anchor? So I think that is where whom do we approach to study Vedanta becomes important. And from my experience, what I can say is that we will have to go to an authentic source. And in my case, of course, I will always recommend Swami Chinmayanji because that is my approach, or that is where I found my source, right? So similarly, there are other institutions as well, like for example, Ramakrishna Mission, a lot of other we can. I mean, I'm not naming because I might not name some and feel bad about it. So basically, where do we approach? Where do we go to get our a whole study of scriptures? So therefore, I think that is one thing all of us should check. Secondly, with respect to this whole thing, regarding the pitfalls, I think all of us should be open about a lot of things, right? You know, we cannot go to Vedanta or any other Adhyatmic matter with a closed mind. For example, you know, many of us are very fixated about science. Now, I'm not an anti-science person, okay? That is not my point. And I really appreciate and value it. And I also want to walk that path. But the whole point is, many of us are so fixated about science, so that anything, let us say, the whole point, you know, only those things that appeal to our head goes into our head. Something which is spoken from a very emotional point of view, we might be completely close to it. So I think that way our openness really matters. Then again, the question is, are we serious about it? Now, Bhagavan Shankara says, and even this Tattva Bodham, Bhagavan Adi Shankara gives the qualification for a seeker, qualification for a student who want to study Vedanta. So there is sadhana chatuštayam and all of that. So one of that is mumukshutvam, right? And mumukshutvam, Gurudev Swami Chinmayanji, he translates the word mumukshutvam as a burning yearning to be perfect. You know, so you have to burn with a yearning to be perfect, right? So basically, how intense is our need to walk the path? So that intensity, I think we need to cultivate. And how do we do that? We can do that only by reading more of this, more of this literature, comparing it with our own lives, understanding the limitations, our own experiences, understanding how compromised we are in many ways. I think that will take us through. That will intensify our need to study Vedanta. I think that will guide us further. And as all the masters, as the scriptures itself say, when the student is ready, the master arrives. So we cannot go and purchase a guru from the shops around, the cities. But then all we can do is get ourselves better so that we become deserving of a master. So I think that is all we have to do.
Thank you, Srinath. I might add that we have today the benefit of technology, and Advaita Academy is itself one of the example of utilizing this. And we have more than 12,000 video lectures on our website and YouTube platform on various aspects of Vedanta, various texts of Vedanta, from acharyas and swamis and swaminis who have studied it in traditional manner from a guru shishya parampara. They're easily available. I mean, it is very difficult. There was a time when, in Shankara's time, the Shankaracharya had to travel on foot from his home in tip of Kerala to Narmada, banks of Narmada, where his guru Govindapada was there. Such a long journey on foot. But today, at the click of the mouse, you have this Advaita Academy, and you can just open it and just start listening. Do the Shravanam. So many videos, so many teachers. So I just wanted to add this. And thank you, Srinath. I'm very glad we could have this conversation, and hopefully we will be able to do more such conversations. I want to do more events with you for Advaita Academy, and hopefully we will be able to plan something out in coming time. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, Nidhi. I mean, actually, in fact, the pleasure is all mine because I also be looking forward to be in touch with you. And then, as you said, I would also like to do programs together with you because you are doing a wonderful work. And just one thing, so I also regarding this Advaita, regarding Advaita Academy, the previous conversation you had with Swamiji on Karya Karana Sambandha, I actually went through it. That was a wonderful discourse. Actually, it gave a lot of clarity regarding a lot of things, especially related to Ishvara. So, I just wanted to underline that point, what you said. Advaita Academy is doing a lot of work, and I went through some of the courses you're offering. So it is very innovative, and I think all of us should make use of it.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Srinath. Viewers, with this we come to a conclusion of this session of Weekend Conversations, and we will soon be announcing next week's events. Watch out our follows on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we also have a Facebook group, Advaita Academy Discussion Group. Join the group, engage with us. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Shri Guru Hari Om.